Today, I want to discuss QB1 Beyond the Lights, along with Spencer Rattler, his ineligibility, Nick Scalzo, and my favorite character, probably Lance Legendre, and all that's coming up after the bumper.
What do you mean you don't subscribe to my son's YouTube channel?
Mama, no!
Just snap the damn ball, RJ.
What's up, kidfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. So it's OU related, college football related, sports related. We have a good time, and today I'm joined by my buddy Steve Bullard, who is the kind of degenerate like myself who watches Netflix documentaries on Saturdays about high school football players that are now college football players, and we got these takes. Steve, how you doing, dude?
Doing great, RJ. How are you?
I'm getting there, man. So when we last talked, like I had housed this series because it's my job. I plan to write about it on OUinsider.com, but there were a few things that I took away and I wanted to address off the top. So Spencer Rattler's ineligibility, which I know you know about because you are a great Sooner fan, was a big deal last year, and nobody actually knows for sure what he was made ineligible for, but his family and he addressed the ineligibility at Pinnacle in high school, where he was not allowed to play for the remainder of the season, on the show in the last episode of the show. So I sat through all of this, but I'm going to read you some of the quotes and just reaction. We'll talk about it. So the first one was Spencer, and he says, I've heard all kinds his dad said, I've heard all kinds of rumors, and 98% of them are wrong, so I'll just put that out there. It's a private thing. We're going to keep it that way. He made a mistake, and he's moved on, but he did not hurt anyone. There's no crime. There's nothing on his record. There's nothing on his school record. And his dad goes on to say, look, he was not doing drugs at school. He was not having sex at school. All this stuff is dumb. If it was just some kid that didn't have his profile, you would never have heard about any of this. But this is something he has to learn, that he has this platform now. With that platform comes responsibility. And then Rattler added, really is just, I felt bad for letting my parents down. That's what really hit me. My dad and my mom put so much effort and money and time into me. Kind of embarrasses the family and let my team down. That was big. So had you got there?
No.
Okay.
You just spoiled it. He got suspended?
He was made ineligible. So no, this matters,
no,
right?
I'm not quite that far though.
No, it matters because it's 30 days, right? He was made ineligible for 30 school days. So basically 6 weeks, which torches the season. But if he was suspended, he wouldn't have been a part of practice or the team or any of the team-related activities. And that's a big part of the show, right, is watching him interact with his teammates.
Yeah, and his interaction with JD is certainly something we'll miss.
JD Johnson committed to Michigan last April, which is interesting because he's a tall, pro-style quarterback that seems to fit what Michigan was doing in 2018, but not necessarily what they're doing in 2019. And Pep Hamilton is now an XFL coach, and Josh Gaddis is the offensive coordinator now. So I'm interested to see if that commitment sticks. But they're quarterbacks. Quarterbacks usually stick, unless they're Lance Legendre, which we could talk about. But what did you think was most interesting in this show?
Man, that's a great question. All three quarterbacks they spotlighted were so different, I guess. I guess Nick and Spencer were similar in that they were at affluent high schools and had those kind of things going on. But I really was most intrigued with Lance's story, his recruitment, his honesty about his commitment to Kansas when he's just saying, like, I just want to seal up a spot, and then his relationship with his mom and then other people in his life as well. It's by far the most intriguing. Whenever they cut to New Orleans, I was most intrigued at that point.
Yeah, and I felt that one because I was, we were talking about this in conversation, and I was saying I had to check myself about, is there stuff that I just don't like, or is there stuff that is wrong? And most all of this fell into the bucket of, it's just stuff I don't like if it rubbed me the wrong way. And I'm watching Warren Easton, which is where Lance played quarterback. He decommitted from Kansas. He committed to Maryland, where he's planning to play quarterback. But I'm watching his coach, Jerry, and I'm watching Munchie Legault, those guys out there that are coaching them, Easton Eagles. really snazzy uniforms, but I'm going, hey, that's a North Tulsa high school. Like that was in my bloodstream. It's right down to, I'm not gonna cuss today. Hey, I'm not gonna cuss today because y'all catching every pass, and then they don't catch every pass, and they're getting lit up. I was like, okay, it's like being a Booker T or McLean right now. That's great.
Well, I wish Maryland was playing Texas again so I could have a chance to cheer for him again. But I'm going to be rooting for Lance.
No, he's a good kid, right? And that was Nick and Spencer. Nick Scalzo committed to Kentucky, and Spencer, of course, is a true freshman at Oklahoma. So Nick is a true freshman at Kentucky. Those guys they're cocksure, man. They like, I get competitiveness, and we all want it. But there's just some stuff in there that I was going, man, oh yeah, that's right, they're 17. And I was thinking, man, I was an idiot when I was 17, and I knew everything. And you know what? These kids are being followed around for like a year with cameras while we see them know everything and know nothing all at once.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't get followed around with the camera when I was 17. But Netflix, the way Netflix cuts it, they sort of, I don't know, they kind of sort of lured us into not liking these guys a little bit. Like Scalzo, for instance, they'll be showing Lance tossing the football on his front lawn to a buddy and talking about life, getting out of the hood, trying to make it in life, and then it cuts to Nick Scalzo, who's on a jet ski in the ocean,
deep sea fishing for sharks,
just doing rich kid stuff,
man. Doing backflips or stuff off the roof of the house into the pool. And this is not stuff that's out of the ordinary. We know these stories, we've heard it, but yeah, I mean, that stuff kind of hit me, and I'm watching even Spencer at Pinnacle, which is that's a private school, and both Pinnacle and Cardinal Gibbons, yeah, that's right, in Florida, those are, for lack of a better term, rich schools, right? And Warren Easton is not, but I'm glad that Peter
Pinnacle had a different uniform every home game.
Well, I mean, and they were snazzy, right? I mean,
yeah.
But also, in and of that, the kid that was the most even keel, and the kid that I felt like most understood what it meant at a personality level to be a quarterback was Lance, because he just wasn't as excitable as we're used to. And I like excitable quarterbacks. I like intensity. That's my kind of guy. But when people would say what a quarterback is, they talk about a guy that just is monotone the whole time. And that seemed to be more Lance than it was Nick or Spencer.
Yeah, I agree. He was really easy to root for in the show, and I think he'll do well at a place like Maryland, honestly.
Yeah, Mike Locksley being the head coach there, Dude's offensive coordinator at Alabama. I was wondering, because I see dual threat, and dual threat to me in recruiting usually means that kid can't throw the ball, right? It's usually what it means, or he's not as accurate as some. And what I got out of this, which was good, was one, yeah, he can take off and run with the ball, but also he put it where it was supposed to be. They just didn't catch it.
Yeah, he was struggling with the lack of talent on the other skill positions on his team for sure.
How'd you feel about the recruiting aspects of this? Because one of the things that goes along with being recruited, being committed, is it's not just you that wears Kentucky or OU, your entire family does. And they all of a sudden become fans of a team that they may not have even really acknowledged except casually. And then you got your inside Lance's recruitment, because he's the only guy that reopened his recruitment and was actually being recruited in full during this show.
Well, I thought it was an interesting look. I'm intrigued by that. I know you live it and breathe it, but I don't see that side of it very much. The team picture for Warren Easton, remember the coach was asking them all to take off their wristbands and different things like that for the picture. They need a clean picture. And he goes up to one of the players. I don't think it was Lance. I can't remember who it was. And he says, "Take that wristband off, man. You're not even committed to LSU. You're committed to Florida."
I remember that.
He had a wristband on for a school he wasn't even going to. But you watch that team with Easton especially, they talked about it a whole lot more, because they had a lot of players that was kind of their only ticket out, and it was so important to them. And they talked about it all the time. You mentioned Munchie earlier. Munchie was always talking to him, giving him incredible recruiting advice, and I thought that was really some of the most interesting scenes in the show.
Yeah, I mean, Munchie played quarterback at Cincinnati, blew out his knee. I don't think that was the reason that he didn't play in the NFL, but getting to know him just a little bit, that dude was awesome in that he straight up said, hey, look, get to know the strength coach wherever you go. Just when you go on visits, get to know the strength coach because that's the dude you're going to see the most. And I was like, yo, that's 100% correct. So, like, when we talk about Bennie Wiley at OU, for instance, that dude really does get to see them more than anybody else does. So you'll have guys that basically they endear themselves to him, he endears them to them, and those guys end up playing. Like, John Calipari actually did that on this show, on this channel. He said, when I didn't know what I needed to do, I would talk to the support staff. I went to strength coach. I went to academic advisor, said, who's working? And that was who played. And I'm going, yeah, that's really solid. And Lance looked like the kind of kid that would actually follow through. Whereas Scalzo and Rattler, I think they know what they're going to do. And they don't really care that you don't think it's what they should do. They're going to go do it.
Lance had a ton of respect for Munchie. You know, when he would talk, he would nod his head, say, in fact, after that thing you referenced about the strength coach, I believe Lance said, man, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So, he was absorbing everything he's saying. Yeah, Nick and Spencer's body language kind of said, you know, they both had probably private coaches since they were 2. And so they've been coached. There's not a whole lot more you can tell those guys.
Yeah, well, and the thing that was off-putting to me about Scalzo was he just decided to start calling plays, which, you know, is great in a movie. And Peter Berg, who is the executive producer and showrunner of QB1 Beyond the Lights, also directed Friday Night Lights, the movie, and was a executive producer on the TV show. So he knows this story, and he loves these stories in the way that a lot of people do. But that's a storyline that usually belongs in a movie. Like, watching 17-year-olds just kind of shake off their coaches on the sideline, especially if the head coach is calling plays, is not something that normally goes over well. And it didn't seem to there. And I kept going, man, at some point, somebody's getting yelled at. And I don't mean in a pleasant way. And maybe that did happen because it's a TV show. But also watching his dad as a wide receivers coach, who I'm pretty sure was a lay coach, because I think he like built cars or whatnot for a living. But man,
that was, didn't have a coach's salary.
Right. It was interesting though, right? Because the only guy that was, I mean, you got Lance, who's got his mom, and she obviously doesn't coach, but I recognize her from the stands, just 100%. I've seen that woman at many football games just losing it, and that's great. It's awesome. And then you got the Rattlers, who are what you would expect to think of as great quarterback and football dad, football mom, parents. And then you got Scalzo, and that was just interesting because mom was up there by herself, just coming apart. And you got dad on the sideline going, hey, can you fight for my kid to get this record? Because it's within reach. And then come to find out, it's the head coach's record. That was, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. He was like, he's going to get your record. He's like, all the touchdowns have been passing touchdowns? And they're like, yeah. So they played with that a bit of drama, which I appreciated, right? They built tension where nobody else probably would have built tension, right? Because you got like, I want to say 7 minutes in there where it's touch and go about whether or not Nick's going to even play. And I'm going, they ain't up that much. Like, they ain't up 70-0. But that was there. And I wonder, how did that hit you? Because I know that hits me because I'm on those sidelines. But, like, how does it hit you?
Well, that was a question I was going to ask you, even though this is your show. But I'll answer it.
Please.
My first thought was, man, I can't stand that Jerry's doing that. Jerry being his dad.
Right.
But then I thought, if that's my kid out there, and he's got 5 TDs, and I know that all the other games are not going to be like this, you know, probably. So he may not have a chance to do this again. Would I fight for him? Would I at least go to the coach and say, hey, I'll make you aware of it, you know? Let's, you know, if we get him another one, let's get him. And I know that happens at games all the time. Coaches try to get their kids records when they can, when it doesn't really detract from the gamesmanship itself. And I thought, you know, he's just being a dad. He's definitely being a football dad, but he's just being a dad.
Yeah, and I thought that too, because that was one of those, it's falling in that category of, is it wrong or is it something I just don't like, right? And I like to think that I would conduct myself in a certain way. I don't know, right? One, The two little girls that I am responsible for are just that. They're little girls. And so I don't have a boy. But also, I see that stuff and I understand it because parents go through recruiting, especially at this level, maybe one time ever. You know, they go through high school football one time ever. I go through recruiting with, I think I told you this, 50 to 75 kids every year. You know, and I go to a bunch of games and I stay for a quarter so that I can go to another game and maybe hit 4 or 5 in a night, right? And watching parents has always been really cool because I get to know them and I get to know just what they think they know, and then they'll ask me. And if they ask me, I'm able to talk to them and tell them the truth. But, man, sometimes you'll end up with conversations like what you saw with Lance's mom, which is, hey, I don't think you should go to Kansas because I can't go to every game. And I'm going, man, Kansas would be a good spot for him in my head, right? I'm going, no, that's a good spot for that kid. And I was kind of heartbroken when he reopened his recruitment. Now, you know, he's Maryland and it's fine. But like at the time, you're going through this and you're going, man, you're telling Tennessee, no, we're not going to play wide receiver. No, thank you. And I'm going, actually, maybe entertain people. Like, let them offer you. And then later, let's say, you know what, we want to be a quarterback at Florida State, Maryland, whatever. Watching that, were you thinking that maybe she was just being a little too cavalier? Did you understand where she was coming from? Like, especially you are a parent.
Well, she seemed a little all over the place to me. She said what you said about Kansas, but then, you know, a couple episodes later, she's saying, you know, anywhere you want to go, baby, you know, right. And all that. And then he ends up at Maryland, so he ends up further than Lawrence, Kansas. Although to them, maybe they don't even know where Lawrence, Kansas. They didn't know where Iowa was.
Right. Iowa State.
Right. It wasn't even the right school.
Right.
Yet. And so I mean, and she professed she wasn't she was playing catch up on the whole football thing. But to your other point about him decommitting from Kansas, I felt the same way. And then the next game he goes out and plays terrible. Mm-hmm. 3 picks, and I literally said to the TV, I was like, you better call Kansas back. Like right now, the letters are going to be disappearing. He looked terrible, you know. He was just, but you know, then he came around, and he's a great talent, a great kid. So I'm happy for him. Yeah,
and it was like you said, it was easy to pull for. I kind of want to pivot back to Spencer because I think I'm going to write about this because there was a really cool scene between JD Johnson, the backup quarterback, and Spencer Rattler. Johnson, as I mentioned, has committed to Michigan, so the kid can play. But I was like, man, Spencer, you're being just pissy and mean as the captain and leader of this team to the dude that he had a bad practice, not even a bad game. And then you watching them interact throughout the rest of the show, and you get to understand that's more of their friendship. Is them just throwing barbs at each other because they're in the weight room. And Spencer is being made fun of because he's so OU, right? And he's saying, I don't know how to write a haiku. And JD was like, yeah, if it was sooner, it'd say Spencer. And then he was talking about, you're going to get all 3 of these L's. You're going to have to play a 4th year. Remember, think about this. You have to play a 4th year because nobody wants you. So they're already thinking professionally in 3 years. And Spencer talked about coming to Oklahoma to win the job. And the idea that his backup quarterback would use ammo of, you're not going to win a Heisman, you're going to take 3 losses, you're going to be in the run, and then you're going to get sat down. And you're not going to win 3 national championships, like you said. And, oh, by the way, you're going to lose to Texas. Like, going, man, you guys are – yeah, you guys are ruthless. Like you're in a weight room the day before a game, and then they shook hands. And I was going, man, okay, that's cool. For a number of reasons. 1, because that was really competitive. And 2, because they did shake hands, even if it was like a bet, which is kind of what I took it as. But also, Rattler's like, hey, come to the OU with me. Why? So I can beat you? Yeah. Okay. No, it was interesting. Because the farther I get away from being 17, the more I have to work at getting into the head of a 17-year-old, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
And 17-year-olds' heads change a lot because of social media and all the things that they're exposed to and what they know, things they know that we didn't know or I didn't know. But yeah, the way he and JD interacted, I thought was very interesting. The show could have spent more time on that because it was actually pretty fun once it wasn't as uncomfortable as it was in the beginning. Because At first you just thought Spencer's just a terrible person,
right?
Telling him he sucks during practice and they had the competitive Wednesdays, which were interesting, and some game with the defense, and JD was kind of the reason they lost, and Spencer was really mad about it. And I thought, well, I've done that in Monopoly, so it's kind of the same. So, and so, then you see the playful banter, and it's really just them being jerks to each other, but it's just competitive, playful banter to them. That's what friends do, So, and that stuff we did when we were kids too.
A couple things.
And now.
Well, yes, and now, right? And now. Courtesy text. So a couple things I did want to hit on that I wrote down were just how much Spencer understands social media and the power of it. And I think this speaks to what you're saying. All the kids do. It's native to what they do. And how he would use his Instagram to build his following and his brand and let people know what he was doing. Also around there are people that make highlight videos that he was friends with, right? I met a couple of them, and they're on YouTube, and they do this, right? They go to high school football games, they capture all the footage, and they edit it down into what we come to know as, their film. And watching him understand the power of that and understand building himself before he ever steps foot on OU was remarkable, because I have that argument all the time about, like, how much money is Spencer Rattler worth? How much money is Kyler Murray worth because he's coming here versus going anywhere else, right? And I think social media is really interesting in that way, because when I met the kid, he had something like 7,000 Twitter followers. I think now he's up around 26, and he'll probably be up around 50 by the end of the season. But the same thing with Buki, and you saw that too. Like, there was an assistant coach at Jay Sarah that came up to Spencer to say, hey, man, my cousin's out there. He's really good. And Spencer's like, oh, yeah, Buki, he the truth. I met him. And I was like, yo, who would know about this kid if not for these websites where we do this soft, influential stuff?
Yeah, it's changed. It's made the world smaller. You also didn't see a whole lot of interstate games like you've seen. In fact, not just Florida playing against a Georgia team or Cali going to Arizona or something like that, but you see, the Las Vegas, California schools playing St. Thomas Aquinas and IMG and things like that. So cross country stuff and it's like these guys. I remember we play someone 3 hours away, a bus trip 3 hours away in high school, and we didn't know anything about them. We had to call research to know what if they were the Eagles or the whatever to make some trashy sign about them. But now you know their players, what offers they have. Everything. It's just like playing a college team. And the way these kids understand social media, I can only relate it to maybe my understanding of how to program a VCR when I was a kid. Like, none of the adults, knew how to do that, but I did. I mean, that's how they, and it's way more useful, by the way, than VCR because it's obsolete, but they understand social media now like that. I mean, it's just something they absorb and they know how to use. They understand its power. Now, some abuse it and some don't use it well, and some sort of torpedo their own trajectories and careers because of it. But man, they do understand the power of it.
And they understand TV, because that was the other thing that was really interesting to see was the Beyond the Lights cameras became part of the furniture. And that's the best thing possible if you're trying to shoot something like this, or if you're trying to report deeply embedded stories. But when they were in front of local TV or in front of ESPN or in front of a radio host, all of these kids, even JD Johnson, who probably doesn't have that much exposure in comparison to Scalzo or Lance or Spencer especially, they just knew what to do and they knew what to say and they knew how to conduct themselves, whereas they were not remarkably different, but different when those cameras were not in their faces, when those recorders were not on.
Yeah, have you ever just watched old 1978 or 1985 kind of player interviews, and or even old home movies? People had no idea what to do in front of a camera. They had no idea what to do in a TV interview, and these kids do. There was a scene where Spencer was just bagging on JD. It was the first game he actually got hurt, and JD came in for him and didn't do real well at first, and Spencer was saying pretty awful things to him during the game. It's another part where he wasn't a very good teammate. And then he turned it on and did okay. And cameras turned on him like, well, how'd your guy JD go? And he's like, man, he's great, man. He's I knew he'd do it, and I believe in him. And he said all the right things, but just a second ago he was trashing him. Of course, JD turned around and did have a good game, but he got to a bad start. But it just speaks to how well they understand media and how well they understand what to say and what not to say to cameras, and the power of it, and the power of one bad comment, one misspeak, one slur, or anything they say on camera is going to go viral and can derail them.
How do you feel about the Rattlers initially wanting to come up with an MCL sprain versus just say, hey, we're ineligible because Spencer did something stupid that we don't want to talk about. We just know that it wasn't a crime. It wasn't the kind of thing that most people would know about. But because it's our kid, this is what we felt we had to do. Now, again, Michael said we made a mistake. But as a parent, like, what do you think? What do you do?
I think you always try to protect your kids. I'm not saying that they did the right thing, and obviously they don't even agree they did the right thing either. But it's hard to judge someone for making a spot quick decision that protects your kid and keeps them out of that kind of spotlight. You've probably disciplined them your own way and had that talk with them and everything's straight, and then you're like, oh, now the media and the country gets to unleash on them, so let's protect them from that. And they knew the backlash would be crazy, so they did their best to shield them, in my guess, would be what they were thinking.
Yeah, I gotta tell a story about this real quick because I think this is part of it. When this story broke that he was going to be one of the quarterbacks being filmed, I wrote this feature about it for Insider, and I talked to Michael a bit, his dad, about it. And then later, when the ineligibility thing came up, I talked to Michael about it too. And he said what he said on camera, which is, hey, man, it's really not that big a deal. It's private. We don't want to talk about it. We do know he's ineligible, and he won't be able to play the rest of the season. But even me making a video about it, just doing a segment on this channel about it, that video was like 70,000 views, right? So which is to say that we talk about how great the quarterback this kid is? Because I do think that he is a high school version of Pat Mahomes now, without talking about this incident that is going to be around for a very long time, in the way that Mixon is going to, and his punch is going to be around for a very long time. And he has an opportunity to bury it, right, in the way that Mixon is burying it with his good play and more or less walking the straight and narrow. But I find it fascinating that that's the thing, right? Because I did this entire feature at the opening where I got to talk to Michael on camera, Sue on camera, Olivia on camera, Spencer on camera. And that's not the one that people care about. They care about the one where the number one quarterback in the country was ineligible for a reason nobody still knows.
Well, there's two types of people that are interested in it as well. There's OU fans that want to find out what he did so they can build a defense for him, and then there's everybody else who wants to plan an attack for him. Right. And so there's always interest. If this was a kid going to Texas, and we've seen this in the past. There was even an Oklahoma kid going to Texas a couple of years ago who got in trouble at his school in high school, kind of a similar thing, not similar in that they did the same thing, but similar in that, kind of happened while they're in high school, and there were a lot of rumors about it. A lot of people didn't really know exactly what happened, but Texas said, no, we're going to keep you. And everybody else wanted to attack them and say they run a soft program and things like that. So everybody's interested in it, and he wasn't near the high profile recruit Rattler was, but it's not surprising in this day and age. I mean, it's just the culture we live in.
Yeah. I also wanted to get your take on my opinion that this is as close to getting to know any one of these three kids, or even JD for that matter, that you're going to get to. Like, I know I get to talk to some of these kids and I get to know them better than most people get to know them, but, I don't live with them every day. And the ones that I do get to see on the regular, you're never in their house like that. You're never at practice in a meeting like that.
When you can embed cameras, audio, videos into someone's house, mic them. I don't know how much they actually got breaks from cameras and being mic'd. And, I'm sure there were times, but they obviously got to where they forgot they were there. They were background, and so they become themselves. There were a couple scenes early on where you saw them look at the camera or say something to the camera or say something about the camera, and then by episode 4 they'd completely forgotten they were there. So when that happens, you really get to see what these kids are really like. You get to see what they're like sort of off camera, even though they're not off camera. You made a reference to how you see them being interviewed and how they are when they're just kind of hanging out with their friends, but they're always on camera on this show. And in real recruiting life, in other words, you're going to see the sort of the press release version of them. You're always going to hear what you want them to hear. You're going to hear the coach speak, player speak, interview on them. And so, yeah, these things are great. And of course, we've seen it with other things like Last Chance U, and they're kind of similar shows, and it takes kind of pre-D1 kids and through their life, and you certainly get to see what they're like and what their lives are like, and unfortunately what their coaches are like.
Well, and it goes back to me saying that everybody's they're just dudes. Some are more talented athletically than others, but I feel like if you did this with most people, you come up with the same sort of product, which is there's going to be a lot that you like, there's going to be a lot that you don't like. Mm-hmm. And having the ability to parse it and not necessarily take it out of context is always going to be difficult, because as a person who writes headlines all the time, I got to write a headline that somebody wants to click on, as opposed to me going, this is not what this thing is about, but I want people to consume the thing that I made. And I wondered about that when they were teasing this show, like everybody does a trailer, like everybody does almost anything in small doses, because if you're on Twitter, I'm on Twitter. If it's witty, it works. If it is not witty, or if it is longer than 110 characters, people don't care,
Yeah.
And I found that. I'm going to let you go here in a little bit because I appreciate this. I sent a text and you were like, yeah, sure, whatever. And I do.
Well, I had to stop watching it and get off the couch, but that's cool.
Was there anything in particular that you thought was worth talking about that we haven't?
I always wonder, it's sort of the counterpoint of what I just said. I always wonder when the cameras are on, even though they do forget they're there, they don't always forget they're there. Like, they may get some candid shots, and they may get some things that they say just because they get comfortable with the cameras, but these kids still know they're there. And it's not just Spencer Rattler and Nick Scalzo and, other guys that recognize the cameras. The whole team is affected by it. The coaches see it. The coaches hate it because they're just trying to go and try to win a state championship. And it seems like, if you go back to OU with two-a-days in 2011, you see East Mississippi, you see Independence. Both those schools kind of have a little bit of a meltdown as the season goes. You wonder how much of effect those things actually do have on the team. They don't follow too many teams who actually win at all. It seems like there's always some kind of a meltdown. So I don't know. I just wonder what the distraction actually is when with those kind of shows.
It'd be interesting to measure, honestly. But the reason that Last Chance U continues to exist is because it does have the ability to raise the profile of a place, even like East Mississippi, which was really good at playing JUCO football, that you cannot resist it. The boon to your football program, to your university, such as it is to your high school football program, is also immeasurable. So you're saying, hey, let's take this temporary inconvenience of 4 to 6 months and see if it can't help us, 10, 12 years from now. Whereas those coaches and players are like, yeah, but I'm trying to win right now. Like, I don't care about 12 years from now. I care about winning this state championship. And I'm going, hey, man, that's the job. You either want it or you don't.
And East Mississippi, I think, won the 2 titles since they were on the show.
Yeah.
They probably didn't win because they were on the show, and they probably did win because they had that show.
Yeah. No, I think
and Munchie will probably get a good job somewhere because he was on the show, and he showed well, and so yeah, there's definitely more pros and cons. But you just wonder how many teams can focus on really, winning now while the cameras are all over them.
Yeah, man. I think Munchie might end up at Edna Kerr if he's not careful. He graduated from there, and that was a team that beat them, along with John Curtis earlier in this episode. So that'd be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Be fun. He's offensive coordinator at Warren Easton, and he'll get an opportunity. Steve Bullard, one of my friends, one of the great things that's happened to me from being on Twitter, so I can no longer say that Twitter's just trash. Thanks so much, dude.
Hey, enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, RJ.
All right, man.